So if any of you don't want to be on the live video, you're welcome to move sections. I can't blur the face, but I'm sorry, I'm not that sophisticated yet. You guys all right? You look good. You look good. All right. So at this point, I'm going to ask all talking to stop. If you have questions, please ask them as we're going. If you can't see, like who's back there? You can't see. You got to be able to see what's going on because there's a lot of information. Feel free to move into a spot where you can see. We're going to be working on the wheel all year. This is your first day of instruction, so all phones should be put away unless you're videotaping me, which, you know, I'm going to have it on Facebook. No, what did I say? Yeah, it's going to be on Facebook Live, but anyways, it'll not. Did I say Facebook? Yeah. YouTube Live. Sorry, YouTube. All right. So you guys can access this later on. See how good you look. All right, so I'm going to wait till everybody gets settled so everybody can see. So anyways, my point is we're going to be doing this all year long on the wheel. So the instruction's vitally important. When you come to me and say, I need some help, I'm happy to help you. Okay. But when you don't even pay attention and then you come to me for help, I'm like, I really wish you'd have paid attention the first time. Now we all learn differently. Sometimes we have to hear things 3 or 4 times. I get it. There's a huge learning process. The learning curve for this is like, whoo, and then once you get up here, it kind of levels out a lot. Okay. Nick, I'm going to need you to put something on that. So right on my file cabinet there, I've got some really big bandies that'll completely cover that up. Okay. He had a little, I'm assuming skateboard? I don't skate. Okay. He tripped. I don't know. Okay. So anyways, this will be accessible later on for anybody that's not here. So that being said, I just really want your full attention. This is information you need. Sorry. Do you see where they were though? Just so you know. On the file cabinet there? Yeah, there's big ones in there. Okay. So what we're learning today, we're going to be using all year long. I will do some more demos. There's like 30 hours of information to teach you. I'm going to take an hour today, give you an hour to work, and then we'll do little bits here and there. But the best thing you can do is watch and then get on the wheel. And you're going to have some success. You're going to have a lot of failure just because that's part of the process. And then when you get back, or after you've been on the wheel, if you watch again, you'll be like, oh, I get that. Oh, I'm going to do this here. It just makes more sense. You got to get on the wheel, watch some videos. Get on the wheel, watch some videos. And YouTube is such an amazing resource. There's so much available for you to see. You don't really even need me. If you just went to YouTube, you could find the information. But I think it's helpful. There's things in class we do a certain way. So let's just go through this. When you get to the wheels, they're going to look like these up here. I've got the wheel turned around. Normally, you're facing the wheel, the wall. Okay, but you couldn't see me if I'm working up there. So I turned it around so you could see. So this is called the splash pan. I don't know why I've got one piece here. Let's see here. Okay, so this is the splash pan. There's a small piece and a big piece. The big piece always goes on first, and the big piece is closest to me. So when you get to the wheel, I wouldn't sit down right away. Do this standing up. It's easier. When you put the splash pan on, if it's loose like this, it's not on right. It's got to be a tight fit. There is a flange on the splash pan right here. This is the flange, okay? This flange fits under a metal flange under here. So when you put it on, it's going to be a tight fit. So you can see already that's tighter, and it has to be on all the way. So it's hard to push it on. You push and rock it. So rock it back and forth, and it'll slide right into place. Now it's on there correctly. The smaller piece goes on in the back, and there are these little holes that fit into little buttons under here that are on the other side of the big splash pan. And you just take it, and you kind of bring it, downward and in, and you'll hear it snap right into place. Okay, so that's ready to go. When you're working on the wheel, if it's on correctly, when it spins, it'll sound like that. If it's on incorrectly, you'll hear it rubbing like that. That's not correct. Okay. All right, so you understand how the splash pan goes on. What's this called? Every wheel has a splash pan. I'm actually short one. I take the wheels home at times to work on them. Sometimes to actually fix them, other times to actually work and practice and kind of do things for class. And so I do have a splash pan at home I need to bring back, but otherwise everything is here, and these will be ready to go by next Thursday when you start. You'll be using the wheels yourself. I have 10 wheels. There's like almost 40 of us, maybe like 35, something like that. So about a quarter of us can be on there at a time. So I work the wheel projects into everything else. There's a couple of assignment sheets that help you get better. And you'll work through those, and I'll show you those later on. I just want you to understand the process today of the basics of this. So what's this called? Splash pan. The whole thing is the wheel. This is the wheel head. These are aluminum, okay, and they have these bat pins on top of them. The bat pins, when you're throwing, a lot of people throw right on the wheel head without bat pins. When you're throwing, if the bat pins are on there, every time your hand hits those, it's going to take a chunk of skin out. So you don't want to work on the wheel head unless the bat pins are removed. And we leave ours in because we'll work on bats. So here's a bat. These are plastic bats. They make them out of plaster, out of wood, out of all kinds of different material. These are very durable. They work for a long time. The only thing these don't work for, you will see videos if you watch wheel throwing of people with torches, like torching their pieces so it dries them quicker and they can do effects. These will warp with any kind of heat. So we do have a heat gun in here. Don't use the heat gun on these because it'll warp them, okay? There's a small hole and a big hole. Put the small hole on the pin first, and then the other hole just pops right into place, okay? The other parts of the wheel, we have the pedal, and this is like a gas pedal on a car. Let me stick this play on here. So when the pedal is, now you notice this is moving slowly. I need to adjust the pedal. It should completely stop when it's in this position. But when you push the pedal down, the wheel speeds up. The harder down it is, the faster it goes. Oops, didn't want that to happen. Okay. So the further down you push it, the faster it goes. Okay. Now on a car, when you let go of the pedal, it stops, right? Or it just comes back up. This one doesn't, which is nice because you can get the speed you want and take your foot off the pedal. Because I'm going to stop that. Now, the other part of this wheel is the switches. So there's two switches. Those of you guys can see the switches here. Those of you over here can see the switches on the other wheel, on the wheels on the side. The switch closest to you is the power. Up is on, down is off. So if I flip the switch down, let's say it's going, I flip the switch down, the power goes off. Okay. Always please make sure the pedal is up when you turn it off so someone doesn't turn on their wheel and then all of a sudden this thing takes off and causes a big problem. Okay. So pedal up when you shut it off. Okay, the other switch is a direction. Okay, so these wheels go counterclockwise is how I'm going to teach you to throw. So on the wall, on the clock on the wall up here, counterclockwise is like the opposite of that little right hand. That's how I'm going to teach you to throw. Who's the right-handed person? Okay, hands down. Who's left-handed? Got 4 of you. Okay, hands down. So most wheels only go that counterclockwise direction. So most teachers teach how to throw on the right-hand side of the wheel, okay, as it's going counterclockwise. If you're a lefty, you can throw the way that I'm teaching, or you can also throw in the other direction. You just reverse the wheel. And instead of everything doing on the right-hand side, you do it on the left-hand side. But it's not really right-hand and left-hand. It's clockwise or counterclockwise, okay? But the way you reverse it is it's a 3-part switch. It's counterclockwise is at the top, neutral, and reverse or clockwise. It doesn't go from counterclockwise all the way to clockwise. You have to go to neutral first. So when I click the switch, you'll hear it. That's neutral. Click it one more time. Now it's in clockwise. So when I turn the wheel on this time, it's going to go the other direction. So this is going clockwise now. So like I said, working let me show you why real quick. So this is counterclockwise, and the reason this one works for this is the clay would slide through my hands like this. If I have my hands over here, the clay is going to jam into my fingers and it's going to cause issues. If it's going the other way, let me shut that off. I'm going to reverse the direction. If it's coming counterclockwise like this, it slides through my hands on the right-hand side and it jams into my hands on this side here, okay? So there's simple reasons why. It'll make more sense if you work on these later on and try the other side of the wheel. Okay, so you kind of have the basics of the wheel set up. We're going to have our setting counterclockwise. You need clay. And for the clay, you're going to use 1.25 pounds, which number-wise, that's 1.25, right? Okay. Now, relative. I don't worry that you get 1.25. When I grabbed these, the first two were 1.23. It's like, wow, that's really close. That's good enough. 1.3, 1.1, whatever. It doesn't really matter. As long as it's close to that. I picked those numbers just because they seem to work really well with learning how to throw. You can throw cups, you can throw bowls, you can throw a lot of things with that amount of clay. Now, the more clay you have, the harder it gets. The less clay you have, it kind of gets really hard when you work with little tiny pieces because it's harder to do everything, but this is a great amount to start with. So you see the ram's head up on top up there. If you follow that towards the wall, see those bowls wrapped in plastic? Those bowls up there, those were 5-pound pieces that I threw. 5 pounds is very difficult. You definitely don't want to start with that, but that's something students work up to over time if they really stick with it. I had some 2-3 students that were ceramics 2-3 a couple years ago, and they were big time in the bowl throwing, and they were like wanting to throw 5 pounds, and they eventually got to where they could, do some of those. But anyways, so we want to wedge our clay. I've got my 2 pieces. When you come back, grab 2 pieces so you have a backup if the first one doesn't work out. I grabbed an extra one in case I need to show you something else. Wedge your clay. Wedge it on the board up there or on the wedging table, which is at the end of the glaze table down there. It's gray, and it's got these 2 plaster squares on it. That's made for wedging. I brought this back so you can see what I'm doing. So the 2 wedging is the ram's horn and the spiral. So the ram's horn, you just take your clay, squish it, and bring it back. Squish it and bring it back. You're not flattening it, you're just squishing it. But as you do this, they call it a ram's horn because it kind of makes like these 2 horns in the little ram's face there in the middle. If I was doing this one for my wheel, I make the ram's horn, but then I kind of just roll it around at the end so it's more like a cylinder, so I can plop it on the wheel that way. The other one, and this is what I usually do, is a spiral wedge. It's the same idea. I push it and come back, but instead of just coming straight back, I push it and come back, and I do a slight little twist every time, so the clay is just slightly twisted in my hand as I bring it back. And then what it does is it forms kind of like a heart shape or like a diamond, something like that, and I'll just pop it on the wheel like that. So that's what I do for most of my pieces. And the clay we're using in here doesn't need a ton of wedging, but it's a really good idea. It warms the clay up, it aligns those clay particles, and it makes it really ready to work. Okay, so I've got 3 pieces ready to go. Get this out of my way. Bats. So we talked about the bats. I looked up why they call these bats. There was not a good explanation. The best explanation I found was they kind of look like bats that would fly through the air. But, they make red bats and they make, like I said, wood bats, other things. I don't really know where the name came from, but it has stuck, and that's what we call them. Okay? So you know the parts. What's this one? Splash pan, the metal part on here. Wheel head. Okay, the whole thing is this is called the, and then, of course, this is the pedal. Okay. All right. So when you work on the wheel, you're all set up. The other thing you need is the tools that are on here. You have 2 bowls. Okay. One's going to put water in. And then you should have two wooden tools. This is called a wooden rib. And then this is a stick tool. There's probably some fancy name, but everyone I know calls it a stick tool. And then I brought a needle tool back. These aren't back here, but you can bring a needle tool with you. And these are helpful, and I'll show you how to use that today. It's going to have a wire in there, and then finally a sponge. So I'm going to grab a little bit of water in my bowl. I think it might be easiest if I just do it. All right. So fill your bowl about half full. I like my bowl right here because I use my left hand for the water, and it's easily accessible. Pedal goes on the floor. And then your other bowl goes here. Usually your extra piece of clay you can just stick up there. And then my tools are up here, except for my sponge goes in my water. Now, important thing, your chair. Honestly, I've got a couple of taller people in the room, but your chair should be right up against your wheel. And when you sit down at your wheel, if you want to grab an apron, I keep aprons there. I have some on the cabinet back there, and sometimes there's a few over here. If you're throwing counterclockwise, your right leg gets most of the mess. If you're throwing clockwise, your left leg will get most of the mess. I don't really end up with too much of a mess on me now, unless I'm throwing a lot, because the more you do it, you just get better at it and you have less mess. On the aprons, make sure the little things aren't sticking in your splash pan. Okay, so I'm set up. You notice I'm like right here on the wheel. Even if you're tall, if you're short, I'd start here. What happens is it takes a lot of strength, but not like manly power or muscle power. I don't know what the term, that's probably not gender appropriate to say manly power, but anyways, it's not like real muscular power. Muscles help, but little people, petite people, big people, we can all throw, okay? There's just things you have to learn. So if you're standing like this, okay, you're not in a very athletic stance, but if you're like this, you're a lot stronger and more athletic stance. Same thing at the wheel. When you're hunkered down like this and you're close and your elbows get attached to your body, you're a lot stronger, okay? So let's start. I've got 3 steps to throwing: centering, opening, and pulling. First step is centering. Okay, that's getting the clay in the center of the wheel. If you throw your clay on the wheel like this and you turn your wheel on, that is not very centered. It's like all over the place. You know, it's like my hands, I'll put my hands on here, like it's all over. So I want to start with my clay as close to the center as possible. So I just get My finger's a little bit wet, put them right in the middle of my wheel. And I know exactly where the center is there. And that's where my clay is going to go. You can put it down, you can push it down. Some people teach that way. It really helps to smack it down there. So I find the middle and I plop it right in the middle like that. Okay? It's the only time I really hear that noise in class. You can also get your wheel going slow and you can kind of check and make sure it's in the middle. Now, I'm going to get my hands wet because you'll need your hands slippery and wet when you do this. See my hands moving? Okay, you can tell the clay isn't perfectly centered, but it's pretty close to center as opposed to going like this, which will happen with some of this, okay? All right, so first step is centering. I get as close to the center as I can to start with. You can move it closer by hand, okay? And now I've got a couple steps in centering. I want to get it attached to the wheel very strongly or well. I don't want it sliding around. I'm going to cone it up and I'm going to cone it down, okay? And then finally, when I'm done, it'll be like a little cupcake shape, or basically like a cupcake. What you call it? Hockey puck. Yes, I like saying the hockey puck, but nobody ever responds to the hockey puck. Who knows what a hockey puck looks like? Yeah, enough of you. Okay, good. All right, so we need slip. We get slip by wet hands. Oh, let me take these off because better to throw without gloves. No gloves. Yep, no gloves. All right. So my hand's wet, my clay's wet, and you can see my hands moving. So what I'm going to do, and this is what you need to do, you need to make sure your elbows are attached to your body. Strongest place is right between your thighs and your hips, just right there. Lock them in, hunker down on it, and you're going to push the clay down and squeeze and push towards the wall. So remember, pretend like the wall is right here because you guys will be facing the wall. Push it towards the wall, down and squeeze. Okay, so that's the first step of centering. It's not perfectly centered yet, but it's close. Now, what's going to happen with most of you, your hands are like this, and it's going to bounce you around. And I'm showing you, not to be funny, because it really will do that. It's gonna bounce you around. And I personally got a little bit out of center, but you just have to really think about being totally like a. So with the wheel, the thing with the wheel is this: the clay does all the work. Oh, sorry, the wheel does all the work. Your hands, if you hold them in the right spot strong enough, the clay has to move around them, and magical things happen. But it takes a while to get to that point that it works that way. So let me recenter that a little bit. Okay, so the next step then, now it's attached well, is I'm going to cone it up. And the way I cone it up is the same idea. I'm gonna lean into it, but not push down. I'm going to lean into it and then squeeze my hands together like this, and also like this, both ways. So I'm going to lean into it. So I'm pushing it towards the wall, same time squeezing the clay together, and that's coned up. Now to cone it down, I'm going to push the clay down, but if I just push it down, it's going to get wobbly again. I don't want that. So before I push it down, I'm going to push on it with my hand. So can you see the clay move over a little bit? And then this hand will bring it down. When you're working, if your clay gets sticky against your hand, it's going to stick to your hand and tear off. So keep everything lubricated. Also, please don't just take your sponge and just squeeze water like that because it's just getting water everywhere. It's adding a lot of extra water you don't need. So, you can add a little bit of water that way, like a little bit. Or the best way is just to get your hands wet and get it wet because you need everything slippery. Okay, I'm going to cone it up again. What do I do? Lean into it, squeeze your hands together. Okay, lean into it, squeeze your hands together. This is the part where people tear it into two pieces. You got to make sure everything stays slippery. Coning it down, I push into it, and the other hand brings it down. You notice I'm trying to keep my elbows attached to my body as much as possible. Okay, so there's that hockey puck or cupcake shape. So now I'm ready to go to step 2. So what did I just do? Started with a C. Centered it. Looks like it's not moving, okay? I mean, you can see it spinning, but it's not wobbling around. So for opening, and that's the next step. Everybody say opening. Okay, you want to open it by making a hole, and then you're going to open the hole up. Okay. The other bucket, by the way, or container, is for your gooey clay. And before I forget, never put gooey clay in the feed me bucket because that's just a mess. Nobody wants to get in there and touch that. We have a gooey clay bucket. I'll show you at the end, but just don't forget. Okay. Okay. So I'm going to get my hands a little bit wet. I'm going to make a hole in the top. I used to teach a different way. I'll show you the way I used to teach. Get your elbows locked in, put your thumbs together, and push down. But I think it's much better just to get your elbows in, support, if you're using your right hand, support it with your left hand. Other ways it'd be the other way around. Support, and you're going to push your middle finger down into the clay. Straight down. And what you want to do is you want to be about 3/8 of an inch from the bottom. Okay, so I'm going to stop my wheel, and this is where you would use the needle tool. Stick the needle tool in, slide your finger to the bottom of the needle tool, and you can see exactly how thick it is on the bottom of the clay. Okay, if you go all the way to the bottom and you're making a bowl, your bowl's going to have a hole in it. Okay, but when you're practicing, if it goes all the way to the bottom, it doesn't really matter. So if it's too shallow, don't worry about it for the practice. Okay, it'd still be okay. So I know now also I made a hole in this, right? You don't want a hole in your piece. As soon as you start working, that hole will fill up. The hole will not be there at the end. Okay, so I centered it. I've started opening by making the hole. Now I need to open the hole up. So I'm going to get my wheel going. And you notice my wheel's going fast for these first two steps, centering and opening. Now I need some water because it's already sticky. So I'm going to put some water in there. I'm going to get my elbows attached again. I'm going to support my hand with my left. And I'm going to pull, now put my finger to the bottom and pull straight back to open up that hole. Now, the question is, how big do you want it? I want the hole open as big as like a coffee mug on the inside. This is where I want you to start. So I'm going to pick this off here so you can see what it looks like, because I know you can't see everything. So the hole on the inside is about as big as a coffee mug on the inside. Okay, just relatively. Okay, small hole and okay, so that's ready to go. So I centered it, I opened it 2 steps, I made the hole and I pulled it open. Now I'm ready to pull. And this is where the kind of the part that seems magical happens. When you do this, a little bit more water on it this time, a little bit of water inside. When you're done, if you leave water in it, it makes your piece weak and it'll crack at the bottom. So when you're done, make sure you don't leave water in it. But when you're working on it, there's going to be some water in there. So when you're on the pulling steps, you want to slow your wheel down. Here's the deal. How many of you have been on one of those merry-go-rounds you push yourself? Like, and you like want to fly off of it, right? Because that centrifugal force is spinning and throwing everything out. When you're throwing, I want a tall cylinder. If it's going too fast, that centrifugal force is going to make it into a ball. So slower speed is better for this part, okay? Here's the deal for pulling. Your hands need to be one unit. You need to get your elbows attached. So you can lock your thumbs. A lot of times if your hands are just close together, I use my middle fingers. You can also throw with knuckles and other parts of your, whatever. But for this, start with your middle finger. So elbows attached. I got my hands locked together. I got my fingers so that they're going to pinch together. They're going to pinch some clay. And then as I pinch the clay, it's going to cause the clay to go in. And I bring my fingers up slowly, and it makes that clay go up. Okay? One other trick that I've learned. So this is how I did it when I first learned. I've added a sponge, and I knew people threw this way. I'd never seen it. If you have a sponge over the outside finger, it really helps to grip that clay and makes the clay come up better. So I'm going to do it that way. So it's a better way to do it. So elbows in, hands connected, fingers together. And I'll change positions in a minute so you guys can see better over there. But over here, you guys can see that. So I'm going to squeeze in slightly, get some pressure on there, and I'm going to slowly bring this clay up. And you see the clay rising. Now, when you get to the top, your fingers, you're putting a lot of pressure. And when you get to the top, if you're not careful, your fingers will go like this and it'll mess up the top. So when you get to the top, you have to gently release the pressure. And first time you mess up the top that way, you'll be like, okay, I understand. If you mess the top up, you just get it wet with your fingers and you try to, just kind of get it going again nicely. Also, as you're working on it, it's going to get too wide on you at times. You just get everything real wet and you can gently force the clay back in. So I'm going to pull facing this direction for a minute, pretending like I'm sitting here so you guys can see. Everything's still well lubricated. I'm double checking it to make sure. So elbows need to be attached to the body, but I'm standing up so you can kind of get this position. Fingers in. My middle fingers are across from each other, and I'm just pulling up the clay gently. Okay, kind of like that. Now, a couple things about this is seeing helps, but this is more about touch than it's sight. So if you continue watching their Great Pottery Throwdown, which we will this year, we'll watch more episodes. We'll see an episode where they throw blindfolded. You can throw blindfolded because it's more about touch than it is about sight. I mean, I did it just to see how it would go, and it wasn't hard. I mean, I was good at throwing already. Don't try to do it until you learn. But I was good enough at throwing that throwing blindfolded was not hard because it's about touch. Now, the other thing is, as you're doing this, the reason I mentioned touch, it is really thin about right here. If I squeeze here, I'm going to cut all the way through it. There's more clay up above, and there's more clay down below. So I'm going to do a pull from starting at the bottom, but when I get up towards that skinny, the part that's thin, I'm going to just release the pressure gently, keep moving up till I get to thicker clay again. Let me do one more pull here. I'm getting a lot of clay under there at the bottom, bringing that up. There's the thinner spot. I'm just gently gliding along that, get to the top. Now my fingers are sticky on the inside, and that's going to cause it to tear, so I'm going to re-wet real quick and go right back to where it was. Right to there. Okay, that's about as good as this one's going to get. Now, I also want you to learn to cut the skirt off. The skirt on the clay is that little part that is attached to the wheel on the outside. So you take the stick tool, and as it's spinning, you're going to cut down into the clay. So as it's spinning, you're going to cut down into the clay. So I'll get the wheel going, and I'll show you how to do this. And I'll do it here, and then I'll move around so you guys can see the other angle. So I'm going to just have my wheels going slow. I'm cutting down into the clay with a stick tool like this. Okay, so I'm going to change angles. So pretend I'm sitting this way if you guys can see over there. I'm just taking the stick tool, if it wasn't cut already, you just gently cut down into the clay very slowly and bring it all the way to the bottom. And then we need to get some water in there so it's easy to cut off without it sticking. Just your water drips down your stick tool into that groove like that. And then you just take the stick tool, and you can stop your wheel if you want. You're going to just cut that extra clay off. So this all has to be trimmed off later on. It just saves a lot of work later on. Okay, if you were keeping this, you would make the rim real nice at the end. We have some tricks on doing that, which I'll teach you that later on. But you make it real nice. I'm going to show you. So you're going to do some practices where you cut the pieces to see what they look like on the inside to evaluate how you did, and you'll rate yourself. And there's a checkoff sheet and all that. But take the wire, hold it tight like this. Use your thumbs to push it flat against the bat. Slide it to the middle of your piece, and then straight up. So that shows you what it looks like from the sides. You can see it's thicker at the bottom. You kind of see where it's thinner, and then a little bit wider at the top. Okay. So at this point, you would clean up your hands. You'd record on your sheet. You'd have to cut 3 of them before we get to keep one, because I want you to get some practice in. Now, you could practice 100 times. That's okay with me, but you got to do at least 3 recorded before you keep that first one. So it gives you a little chance to get better at it. We have 2 sheets. One's going to be due first semester. One's going to be due second semester. So you're going to be on the wheel a minimum of 8 times. So 4 first semester, 4 second. If you love the wheel and you get hooked, you can get on the wheel a lot more if you want. Okay, as long as everybody else has turns, and it'll work out fine. So that's the basics of it. I did forget to tell you something. So remind me. Well, actually, I'll remember to tell you. I'm going to move to the next piece now. So crumple that up. It's going to go in my gooey clay bucket. And you can use the wooden rib just to scrape that off of there. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and put my next piece on there. And my wheel head is kind of slippery, so this will allow me to show you how to get it attached if it's not wanting to stay on there. So I'm going to put this one on there like this. Well, that one's stuck. I want to make it so it doesn't stick. So, okay, so you start to throw, and you're trying to put this on there, and see how it's sliding around? It's like it's not really stuck to it. If you hold it on there, it builds up some friction, a little bit of heat. It begins drying out, and then you can usually pick it up and pop it back down on there, and it'll stick. Okay, a lot of times it's going to slide around. You just have to practice to get past that. Okay, so first step is what? Centering. And I got to get it stuck to the wheel head. So I'm going to lean into it, kind of push down and forward. Okay. I know I'm making it look easy. It's not easy to start with. Okay. Next step, it's stuck to the wheel head. I've got that skirt on the outside. I'm going to squeeze it as I'm pushing it towards the wall. I'm also really pushing down on the edges to try to get my hands down on the edges. So squeezing it together, leaning towards the wall. And now I'm going to go ahead and cone it back down. Now, what I forgot to tell you is when you're working on the pieces, let me cone it up and it's a little bit more obvious. So I've got it coned up. Whenever I let go of the clay, you guys don't see this, but I'm letting go very gently and slowly. When you're working on it, if you let go quickly, it remembers right where your hands were, and it stays right there, and it gets out of center again. So when you're working with it, always let go very gently, like slow motion, and it'll stay centered. But if you're working and you let go quickly, it's going to go back out of center. Okay? So I've got it coned up. I'm going to cone it back down. So pressure on the side, push it down. Okay. Now I'm going to open it up. Support my hand, elbows attached. It's all about body position as far as making it work. I could check the depth, but I know the depth is good, so I'm going to put some water in there. I'm going to pull it back towards me. You want to see a bowl this time? Okay. A bowl you can do exactly the same way. I'm going to do a bowl the same way, and then I'll do a bowl a different way to show you. So I open it up. So this is just like the cylinder so far. I want to flatten the bottom out a little bit with my rib. This compresses it, makes it stronger. Okay. So at this point, I slow my wheel down. I've got it open. So I centered it. I opened it. And now to make a bowl, basically I'm pulling up or out and up at the same time. So I'm making a bowl shape. So I'm going to get a little bit of water on the inside. Got water in my sponge. So this time when I pull, I'm going to slow down a little bit more. So you notice I don't throw with my foot on the pedal. A lot of people do, but I just find it so much better to get the right speed and just have it stay consistent. Okay, so same idea. Hands connected, elbows connected. I'm going to squeeze my fingers together, but rather than pulling straight up, I'm going to pull out and up at the same time. Okay, make sure it's wet again. I'm going to do the same exact thing. Squeeze. Yeah, no. All right, I got a lot more clay. So so before I make it too wet, I'm going to cut that skirt off. So that's where I take the stick tool and cut down into it, get rid of some of that extra clay. I'm going to put some water in there. And cut that skirt off. All right, and I can feel there's a lot of clay down there, so I'm going to try to get a lot more. And I think for this one, that's probably about as big as it's going to get without having problems. If I was making a bowl that I'm keeping, I make the rim real nice by smoothing it out on there. You can use, I'll have some things that you can use to make the rim a little bit smoother. But anyways, that's the basics of a bowl. You see that on the inside. Okay. You're gonna do a bowl and a cylinder. You have a sheet for both. One is due this semester. You're gonna take your wire to the middle, cut straight up. No noodles in this bowl now, unfortunately. But you see how that looks from the profile? It's pretty even all the way top to bottom. Okay. I'll do one quick more one for you. I've got just like 4 minutes. Okay. Now we need to talk about cleanup after this. So I can see my center right here. Stick that on there. Okay. So I'm going to do this real time, like if I was throwing like myself normally. So get it stuck on there, throwing it up, throwing it down, throwing it up again, throwing it down. I'm going to do another cylinder because this is where I really want you to start. So I opened it up to bring it straight out. Okay, I'm going to compress the bottom. Oh, by the way, did we talk about the clock? 12 o'clock? 3 o'clock? No, I didn't. So I skipped this. So I need to tell you guys this. So I'm going to pause this for a moment. This is actually really important. So the clock on the wall up there, this is great that they put it up there this summer. At the top, it's 12 o'clock, right? If I say watch my 6, I'm talking about behind me, my back, right? You guys heard that term. So on the wheel, if you're working counterclockwise, like I'm teaching you, we want to work at 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, or 5 o'clock. You don't want to be working up at 2 o'clock. You don't want to be working over at 9 o'clock. You want to be working at 3, 4, and 5. So everything I'm doing pretty much on here has been at 3, 4, or 5 o'clock. I didn't talk about that. So just realize that. So I've got it open. Next step is pulling, right? Some water in there, hands together. Bring the clay up. Now, on these, I'm doing about 3 pulls to get it to that height. You're going to do, honestly, 10, 15, 20 pulls to get it to that height because you're trying to figure out how hard to push and all of that. That will get better over time. As you're working on it, if it gets too wide, you collar it in. After everything's wet, make sure your hands are slippery, and you bring your hands and bring the piece back in like that. Okay. And then I'm going to grab some more clay at the bottom. Bring that clay up. Okay. Now, if I was making a coffee mug at this point, I'd cut the bottom off. I'd make sure the inside was dry. And I say coffee mug, hot chocolate mug, milk mug, whatever it is you drink in your mugs. Okay. So I told you guys if there's water in there, it makes it weak, right? So you want to get the water out, use a sponge, get that out, make the rim real nice, and then that would be done. Okay, so let's talk about kind of once we're done, what do we do? So if you're using this one, you cut it in half. Okay. After you cut it in half, clean your hands so you can record it. And then we need to clean up. So let's talk about clean up for a couple minutes and I'll be done. So scrape this off. Right. So a few different things. One, we've got to get everything cleaned up. Those sinks over there are the best sinks for cleaning up. When all of us are working, we're going to need to use the small sink, the triple sinks, all of them. So first of all, let's take all our tools and put them in our bowl with the water. And then you're going to, let's turn the wheel off. You're going to go over to the sink. So guys over there, just realize I'm going to come through a couple of times. And I'm going to explain a few things over here. So this first bucket is going to be the gooey clay bucket. This is where the gooey clay goes. And if there's a bunch of people cleaning out the lid off of it, gooey clay goes in here. All the little scraps. Try not to break stuff. If you make a mess when you're doing this, that's fine. Just clean up. Okay, don't leave a mess for somebody else. I'm going to put this in the sink. My tools, I'm going to take those and put them in the sink. Except for my sponge right now. And I've got a little chunk of clay, so that goes in gooey clay. This water all goes into the water bucket. This water it clogs and drains over time, so I'm just using my sponge to wipe out all that extra slip and everything, and then squeeze that out. Make sure you don't leave any tools in the water. And then I'm going to wash this with the sink. The next thing I'm going to do is clean up the wheel and the splash pan and all that, but I need to get a little bit of clay off my hands, just so I'm not dripping all over you when I walk by. So I got 2 sponges that have been rinsed. So I'm going to take my splash pans off. The way you take those off, use your thumbs, push down on the tabs on the outside here, and that pops right off. This comes back. Where's all this water go? Yep, clay water bucket. Don't put it in the sink. It'll clog the drains over time.
I was just testing you. You passed.
Excellent. That goes in there. Now, like I said, try not to make a mess. If you do, just please clean up after yourself. Don't leave it for someone else. Now, I'm going to put these in the sink, and I'm going to clean all this up after you guys are working on the things you need to work on. But understand, you know how to clean stuff. The biggest thing about cleaning these things is water and a sponge. If you just rub water on them, it's so hard to get them clean. Water and a sponge does a much quicker job. So I'm going to clean up my wheel. I'll usually have to rinse my sponges about halfway through and come back with a fresh sponge. Clean my switches, clean the floor. If your pedal's dirty, clean your pedal. If your chair is dirty, clean your chair. Okay. Make sure the wheel head is clean. Okay, if this is all good to go, once my tools are clean, they go back on my wheel right where these are up here. My splash pans go back on my wheel like these are up here. This will be, obviously against the wall. And then the bats go back up here once they're all clean. Okay? So cleaning is just as important as everything else. If we leave the room a mess, I'm going to be miserable. And I'm going to not want people working on the wheel. So we got to make sure we clean up really well. A lot of information, a lot to take in. I know it was long. I apologize, but you guys were great. So I'm going to let you, if you would very carefully, you're going to move out of the way. You guys will move your tables back. And there's blue tape on the floor. The blue tape is for the back side, if you know where, to help you figure out where the legs go. You guys can move on back to your seat. Move the tables back. Be careful of everybody's stuff. I'm going to clean this up while you guys are working. Would you, Jacob? Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it. Take a couple minutes.
Your live stream still going on.
Okay, thank you. No problem, thank you. All right. I think it's a mission.
Lean gigs. So you